I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Chris Burden, and today on this tape I'm going to show you excerpts or visual records from 11 different pieces that I've done starting in 1971 into 1974. The pieces have either been filmed on Super 8, which is the most common, or 16 millimeter or half-inch video. And there's one that's actually a television ad that was taken off the air. As you watch this tape and listen to my explanation of some of the pieces, I want you to remember that it doesn't cover or encompass the whole body of my work, that you're only seeing sort of a very arbitrary selection. You're not seeing the pieces that don't lend themselves to being taped or filmed because of purely technical reasons, such as it's too dark or it's too far away or something like that. You're not seeing the pieces that don't lend themselves to being filmed because it's not right. I didn't want them filmed. I didn't make any sense. There's an exception to that. There's a bed piece, which you're going to see in this tape, some excerpts from it. It's a piece that involves staying in bed for 22 days without getting up. We'll see how successful that is, whether it can convey some of the energy and the feelings that were going on during that piece. And another reason is that I haven't attempted to film some of the pieces is that some of the pieces involve a one-to-one relationship where with me and one person in the audience, and having a camera or just even another person there would disturb the whole setup, and so it's not possible. Other than that, there are some pieces that I've tried to film and haven't been able to because there's been a technical error, either on my part or somebody else's. Somebody forgot to push the button. I couldn't concentrate or give enough of my attention to filming it because I was really involved with the performance. So you're really seeing or what you're going to see today is a very arbitrary selection. Sort of almost a haphazard selection of works. And another thing is that I've been hesitant to release these because of the sort of arbitrary nature of how they've come about. But more than that, it's because film and tape are taken as reality while you, the viewer, or anybody's watching them. So for the most part, I've recorded most of my pieces with still photographs because they're so old-fashioned that they're taken very abstractly and they're taken symbolically. But I guess at this time I feel that there's maybe enough energy in the pieces or in the films that it's important to show them, and that some of it will filter through. But I want you to try to, although I know a lot of you will forget it, to remain aware that you're not seeing the actual experience. And I guess with that we can go right into the first piece, which I've recorded on film, which is 220. This film that you're watching was shot by one of the participants from one of the ladders that you've just seen. The piece consisted of lining the gallery with black plastic and then flooding it with about 12 inches of water. 3 other people and myself waded through the water and climbed onto these wooden 14-foot step ladders. After everybody was in position, I dropped a 220-volt electric line into the water, thereby sealing us in, because if we came down off our ladders and stepped into the water, we'd be electrocuted. I think you can probably see the 220 line coming out of the wall here on the right. The piece is already in progress as you're watching this. It began at midnight and it was to run to 6 o'clock in the morning. This is one of the participants that didn't make it. She's peeking through the mail slot. There's supposed to be 5 people in the piece. All the black that you see is black plastic, and the piece became very ominous, partly because of all this black, but in the situation itself, but also because of the dampness. The air became very heavy, the walls were sweating, the ceiling was dripping. The whole situation was very spooky. What's happening now is that we're at the bottom of our ladders and we're looking at a problem which has developed. The ladders are wooden, they're bone dry, and they're absorbing water. So we have these visions of being on top of our ladders at 5:30 in the morning and being electrocuted. We're just looking at bubbles now that are coming up. You can't actually see them, but we're speculating as to what's going on. There's going to be a jump. As soon as you see us step into the water, there's a 6-hour jump. The piece will be over, and Barbara Burden will have cut the electricity on the outside of the building. So we're coming down off the ladders. The piece is finished. The water level has dropped considerably, and there's some speculation as to what was going on. There's some of those bubbles I was talking about. What happened is that it leaked out of the plastic into the units beside me, but luckily I didn't damage anybody's shops or equipment. In Shoot, I'm shot in the upper left-hand arm by a friend of mine with a .22 rifle. The only visuals I have of this piece is a very short film clip, about 8 seconds long. So I'm going to begin the piece with an audio tape that was made during the actual performance. In the audio tape, some of the things to listen for are, do you know where you're going to stand, Bruce? Then later, right before the film clip happens, you'll hear me say, are you ready? Then you'll hear the clicking of the Super 8 camera. Later, after the clip is over, another thing to listen for is the sound of the empty shell dropping on the concrete floor. Okay, so I think we could go right into the audio tape.
You know where I'm going to do this? See the one? Yeah. I'm going to stand here. Aim for this section in here, okay, below this. And are we ready?
Josh Young asked me to do a piece for the Market Street program from February 18th to March 10th. I told him I would need a single bed in the gallery. At noon on February 18th, I took off my clothes and got into bed. I hadn't given any other instructions, and I did not speak to anyone during the piece. On his own initiative, Josh Young had to provide food, water, and toilet facilities. I think that was part of the piece, the fact that they had to deal with me simultaneously as an object and a person. I remained in bed for 22 days. I'm including this piece because, first, it's an example of the kind of piece I talked about in the introduction. I hadn't planned to film it. The film exists as a pure accident, which I managed to get a hold of. I'm also including it to offset the more dramatic pieces in this tape. I don't know whether the energies of this piece can be successfully transmitted on tape, but to me, this piece remains in my mind as one of the strangest and most interesting piece that I've ever done. At first, it was very hard. The first 2 days were very boring, very painful, and I realized I wasn't anywhere near the end, and I didn't see how I could go on. But by the end or the middle of the second week, I had begun to establish a routine, and I began to sort of enjoy it there. My days were very full, very rich, and I had a very peaceful feeling. And as the piece neared ending, neared closing, I started feeling regret about leaving. I started feeling like I wanted to stay. And I actually considered staying, but I knew that if I stayed, that I would be forced to leave anyway, and that people would consider me crazy. I mean, I knew that they were going to end it for me. But the fact that I was tempted and that I was very seduced into it, to me, that is the strangest part about this piece. Some of the energy, I think, of what was going on in my head was sort of conveyed to the other people. I had a strange power around me, sort of like a bubble or a repulsive magnet. Most people wouldn't come close to me. In fact, most people seem frightened. Because the film is unclear, or the film of Dead Man, which you're about to see, is unclear, I'm going to show you the still first. In the still, you can see me lying under the tarp, and there's 2 flares around my head. I'm actually lying in the street in La Cienega Boulevard, outside the Rico Mizuno Gallery in Los Angeles. The flares were 15 minutes each, and I planned to lie there until the flares extinguished themselves. Then I planned to get up and go home, leaving the spectators sort of wondering exactly what it was about. Unfortunately, someone summoned the police, and I was arrested and booked on causing a false emergency to be reported. This charge comes out of the 1968 campus upheavals, and it's a fairly heavy charge. It carries a penalty, or a maximum penalty, of $1,000 and a year in jail. Some of this film, by the way, is being shot from across the street, and you can just see the flares right through there. At the time, I was very angry. At the time of my arrest, I felt that the police had wrecked my piece, that they had destroyed it. The police, on their part, felt that I was doing some sort of publicity stunt. You can see the police, they've just arrived now. The whole process of the arraignment, the pre-trial and the trial, was very frightening to me. It took a long time, and I was sure that the judge was going to sort of teach this young man a lesson. It was a jury trial, and it lasted 3 days before the case was finally dismissed. Now, if you look, I'm being escorted to the police cars. I'm handcuffed, and I'm being placed in the back of the police cars. The police took a long time before they lifted up the tarp. And when they did, they saw that my eyes were open. They asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. They asked me if I could walk, and I said yes. They asked me what I was doing, and I told them I was making a piece of sculpture. That made them sort of angry, and they said, "You better come with us." And this is a shot of them actually driving away with me in the police car. I began the piece by placing an easy chair in front of a windowsill, facing a windowsill, and a television, a small portable television, facing the easy chair. Barbara sat down in the chair and started watching television. Quickly we traded places, and I started watching television, smoking dope and drinking beer. Other people were preparing their pieces. People were filling the museum. My activity went unnoticed, or not necessarily unnoticed, but it was unimportant and it wasn't considered art. And occasionally people would stoop down and talk to me, and I'd talk to them. After about 15 minutes, I had to establish a distance, and I did this by having Barbara and Charles Hill take still photos of me. This began to say that what I was doing was important, that probably I was one of the artists. After about 5 minutes, I got up, turned off the television, and started walking around the room, turning off lights, until I finally ended up over a steel plate, which was part of the permanent structure of the museum. And it was here where I was to perform the actual fire roll. The pants, which I used in the fire roll, have an interesting story in themselves. They were stolen from the Museum of Conceptual Art in San Francisco when I did the Secret Hippie piece in 1971. They were taken back to Los Angeles and passed around among several friends of mine. The last person who wore them ended up drunk and beaten up in a ditch. And now I'm going to show you the actual fire roll. At 6 p.m., 3 invited spectators came to my studio in Venice, which is very small, and it's well lit by natural light. This piece was specifically designed for a small audience. You can't see them, but they're standing or squatting at the end of my legs, about 3 feet from me. I started the piece by exiting from the back room and lying down, as you saw, and my assistants put on 6-foot glass shelving on my shoulders. Now they're pouring gasoline down the glass shelving, and as soon as they're done with that, they step back, and you'll see that in an instant. And they step back, and they simultaneously try to light the fire. One of them can't do it because his match keeps breaking. And there's the match. The nice part about this piece is that right after I jumped up, the sun went behind a cloud, and then the gasoline made a lot of black smoke, so my studio became instantly sort of dark, and this forced the viewers out almost immediately. So the piece had a natural sort of end to it, which was very nice. We're going to look at this again, the jumping up part in slow motion. I thought it would be interesting. You can see the first match that fails again. Now, watch again for the match that works, and you'll see a blue sort of flame that passes down by my body. That's the vapors. The BC Mexico piece grew out of a utopian fantasy which was to be dropped off in a very remote section of Baja California on the Sea of Cortez. I planned to sort of live there, surviving off the ocean, to live in an isolated purity, perhaps doing small pieces just for myself. The piece was actually a show at the New Space Gallery, and a large notice was put up in the gallery saying that I would be dropped off in Mexico and I would live there for 11 days in isolation. Visitors to the gallery were to participate in the piece vicariously. These are some shots of me loading up my kayak. I didn't take very many supplies because I thought I was going to be able to live off the ocean and survive, kind of. In an instant, you're going to see me in the water, and Charles Hill is loading in a 5-gallon bottle of Sparkletts water, which was very essential to surviving there. And then I start to paddle. Well, I paddled south until I just can't do it anymore, and that's where I land. And I stay there. The piece turned out to be sort of an opposite from my fantasies. It was extremely hot, about 120 degrees. I spent most of my time under a piece of plywood, just trying to stay out of the sun and conserve my water. The ocean was full of live. It was just like a jungle. There were sharks and crabs and everything. Around my tent at night, there were animal tracks. It was very windy. During my whole stay there, I was petrified, and I sort of felt like I was at the edge of the known world. Holding my hands behind my back, I crawled through about 50 feet of glass. Very few spectators saw this piece, most of them just passers-by. I saw the pieces of glass as stars. That's why I filmed it in black and white. Yes, I did get cut up, but that's another reason I didn't film it in color. And I guess we can just go right into the piece now.
Rodco presents Good Vibrations, 22 original hits with the Hollies.
The TV ad piece came out of a long-standing desire to be on television. The more I thought about it, the simplest way seemed to be to purchase a commercial advertising slot. Acting on that, I pulled out the yellow pages and started calling up TV stations to get their rates. I could only afford to purchase a 10-second spot ID. My biggest problem was convincing the station that I was worth bothering with, that I was a legitimate artist. They knew I was a small client, and I knew it too. What you've been watching is the advertisement that actually precedes mine. Well, that was it. You saw how short it was. But to me, the content wasn't so important. It was the idea of being on real TV, which to me means anything you can flip to on a dial. Anything else, cable, educational, video that's not real TV. I didn't have any illusions that people understood this, that they said, oh, there's Chris Burden and he's doing a performance. But I know it stuck out like a sore thumb, and that I had the satisfaction of knowing that 250,000 people saw it every night, and that it was disturbing to them, that they knew something was amiss. And the ad came on, my ad came on 5 times a week for 4 weeks, right after the 11 o'clock news. Back to You is a piece that attempted to deal with my own myth, the myth of me as the aggressive artist, threatening audiences, the evil Knievel of the art world. The tape begins with the voice of Liza Bear, and the piece actually takes place inside a moving elevator. And around the elevator shaft, there were several monitors placed. So what you see is exactly what the audience saw at the performance.
Chris Burden has requested a volunteer. Would a volunteer please step up? Any volunteers? Would a volunteer please step up? A volunteer has been selected to participate. The volunteer is being escorted to the elevator. A sign in the elevator is instructing the volunteer to stick pushpins into Chris Burden.
Any particular place?
Velvet Water was actually a video performance. But before I show you the tapes from it, I want to show you the still photograph of the installation. The actual performance took place on the left-hand side of this photograph. Actually, outside of it, you can see one of the persons on the left in the front row peeking at it. It was a live performance, but because of the clutter of the cameras and lights around me, the audience could only get their real information from the monitors. The large monitor in the center showed an extreme close-up of my face, while the 4 smaller monitors that flank it on either side showed a sort of a wider angle shot, an establishing shot. And during the tape, I'm going to, because I can't duplicate the setup that you see here at the top of the still photograph, I'm going to shift back and forth from the close-up to the wider angle. Today, I'm going to breathe water, which is the exact opposite from drowning, because when you breathe water, you believe the water to be a thicker, richer oxygen capable of sustaining life.